The door slammed shut behind me, echoing through the empty hallway. I stood frozen, my heart pounding in my chest. Ethan's shoes were not the ones greeting me, but a pair I knew all too well. Vera's. "Alara, what in the world do you think you're doing, coming home this late?" Vera's voice sliced through the silence, sharp and accusing. I found my voice, though it trembled slightly. "Vera, I didn't expect you to be here." "It's not about me being here. It's about you neglecting your duties as a wife. Where have you been?" Her eyes bore into me, seeking to unravel any excuse I might offer. I clutched the book about Miami tighter, feeling the weight of her judgment. This wasn't just about tonight. This was about every silent battle, every unspoken grievance that had built up over months. "Ethan told me he wants a divorce," she continued, her words cutting deeper. "I can't say I blame him. You're hardly the wife we hoped for." I felt a cold resolve settle over me. This was not just a confrontation. It was a declaration of war. My marriage, my life, was slipping through my fingers, controlled by a woman who saw me as nothing more than an inconvenience. I had always been the quiet one, the one who avoided conflict. But as Vera's words echoed in my mind, something within me snapped. No more. I wouldn't be the silent, suffering wife anymore. "Vera, I work too, you know. I'm not just a housewife waiting for Ethan to come home," I said, my voice steady now. "You work? That little office job? You think that's an excuse? You should be here, making this a home, not gallivanting around," she scoffed, her disdain palpable. Her words stung, but I stood my ground. "I have every right to live my life, Vera. I'm not just an extension of Ethan." Her lips curled into a sneer. "You're a disappointment, Alara. A real wife would put her husband and his family first." I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm inside me. "I won this trip to Miami, Vera. I was planning to give it to my parents, but now—" Her eyes lit up with a mix of surprise and greed. "Miami? Well, that changes things. Ethan and I could use a holiday." The audacity of her words hit me like a physical blow. "It's not yours to take, Vera. I won it. It was for my parents." She stepped closer, her voice dripping with venom. "You're part of this family now, Alara. Your things are our things. And if Ethan wants to go to Miami with his mother, who are you to stop him?" I felt the anger rising in me, a burning flame fueled by months of her belittling and manipulation. "It's my prize, Vera. I decide what happens to it." Her laugh was cold and mocking. "We'll see about that, Alara. We'll see." She turned on her heel and left, leaving me standing alone, my heart racing with a mixture of fear and anger. I knew then that this was just the beginning. I had to fight back, not just for myself, but for the life I wanted, a life free from Vera's shadow. As I lay in bed that night, Ethan's snores a dull backdrop, my mind raced. Our marriage, once a hopeful union, now felt like a trap tightening around me with each passing day. The man beside me, once my partner, now seemed more like a stranger, a puppet dancing to his mother's tune. Morning came, and with it the usual routine. Ethan, always the early riser, was already at the breakfast table when I entered the kitchen. His eyes were glued to his phone, a frown creasing his forehead. "Good morning," I said, my voice neutral. He grunted in response, not looking up. I poured myself a cup of coffee, the silence between us heavy. Finally, he spoke, his eyes still on his phone. "Mom mentioned you want a trip to Miami." I nodded, bracing myself. "Yes, I was planning to give it to my parents." Ethan finally looked up, his expression a mix of annoyance and entitlement. "You should have discussed it with me first. Mom really wants to go." I clenched my fist, fighting the urge to lash out. "Ethan, it's my prize. I wanted to do something nice for my parents." He shrugged, dismissive. "Well, Mom's been feeling down lately, since Dad passed. This trip could really cheer her up." I could feel the anger bubbling inside me. "And what about my parents? Don't they deserve a break?" Ethan's eyes narrowed. "You're being selfish, Alara. Family comes first." "Your family, you mean," I shot back, my patience wearing thin. He stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. "You're my wife, Alara. That makes my family your family." The finality in his voice was a clear message. In his eyes, I was an accessory, an addition to his life, not a partner. I was to fall in line, to play the part he and Vera had scripted for me. The rest of the day passed in a blur. At work, I found myself distracted, the image of Ethan's indifferent face haunting me. I felt trapped, caught in a web woven by Vera and tightened by Ethan. That evening, I returned home to find Vera in my kitchen, cooking. The smell of her stew filled the air, a stark reminder of her constant presence in our lives. "Alara, there you are. I thought I'd make dinner tonight. You must be tired from work," she said, her voice dripping with false concern. I forced a smile, my stomach churning. "That's very thoughtful of you, Vera," she hummed, stirring the pot. "Ethan told me about the Miami trip. It's a shame you won't be joining us." The casualness of her words was like a slap in the face. "I haven't decided yet, Vera." She turned, her eyes cold. "Oh, but you have, dear. Ethan and I will be going. It's settled." The room felt small, suffocating. I wanted to scream, to shout, to reclaim my life from this woman who had insidiously crept into every corner. But I held my tongue, my resolve hardening. Vera and Ethan might think they had won this round, but I was far from defeated. I would find a way to turn the tables, to expose their selfishness and manipulation. As I sat at the dinner table that night, picking at the stew Vera had made, I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just about a trip to Miami anymore. It was about taking back control, about fighting for my dignity, and I was ready for the battle. The following week was a tumultuous mix of silent dinners and whispered phone calls. Ethan had become increasingly distant, his allegiance clearly with Vera. The trip to Miami, my hard-won prize, now felt like a poisoned chalice. On a particularly dreary Thursday, I received a call from my mother. Her voice, usually so full of life, was tinged with disappointment. "Alara, dear, your father and I heard about the Miami trip. It's a shame we won't be going." Guilt gnawed at me. "I'm sorry, Mom. I really wanted you both to have it." She sighed. "It's all right, darling. We understand. Family must come first, as your husband says." The way she said family stung, a reminder of how Ethan and Vera had twisted the meaning of the word. That evening, as I entered the house, I found Ethan and Vera in the living room, poring over travel brochures. Their excitement was palpable, a stark contrast to the hollow feeling in my chest. "Alara, come look! We're planning our Miami trip," Ethan called out, his voice too cheerful. I approached reluctantly, the sight of them together like this sending a wave of nausea through me. Vera looked up, her eyes gleaming. "We're thinking of staying at this lovely beachfront hotel. Isn't it wonderful?" I swallowed hard, forcing a smile. "It looks nice." Ethan glanced at me, then back at the brochure. "We should book soon. Don't want to miss out." Vera nodded in agreement, her smile widening. "Yes, let's. Alara, would you mind fetching us some tea?" The request, so casual yet so commanding, was the last straw. "Actually, I need to talk to you both about the trip." Their attention snapped to me, a flicker of wariness crossing Ethan's face. "The thing is," I began, my voice steady despite the pounding in my chest, "the trip to Miami was supposed to be a gift for my parents. I won it, and I should decide how it's used." Ethan's expression hardened. "Alara, we've been through this. Mom needs this trip." Vera chimed in, her tone patronizing. "Dear, it's just a trip. Your parents will understand." Frustration boiled inside me. "No, you don't understand. This was something special for my parents. You can't just take it away." Ethan stood up, his demeanor shifting from cheerful to menacing. "You're being selfish and unreasonable, Alara. This is family we're talking about." "I am talking about my family." I shot back, my voice rising. Vera tutted, shaking her head. "Ethan, see what I mean? She's not family-oriented, not like us." I looked between them, my heart racing. "You know what? Take the trip, but this is not over." Turning on my heel, I stormed out of the room, their triumphant smirks burning in my memory. As I headed to our bedroom, a plan began to form in my mind. They wanted to play dirty? Well, two could play at that game. This trip to Miami would be a trip they'd never forget. A trip where karma would come calling, and I would be the one to deliver it. I spent the next few days in a state of cold fury, my mind racing with plans for revenge. Ethan and Vera, ensconced in their bubble of self-righteousness, seemed oblivious to the storm brewing. On Saturday morning, as I sipped my coffee, Ethan slid a brochure across the kitchen table. "We've booked the hotel in Miami. It's going to be fantastic." I looked at the glossy pictures of sun-kissed beaches and luxury suites, a bitter taste in my mouth. "I'm sure you'll enjoy it," I said flatly. Ethan frowned, picking up on my tone. "What's your problem, Alara? You should be happy for us." I stared at him, incredulous. "Happy? You're taking a trip meant for my parents, and you want me to be happy?" He leaned back, his expression one of exasperation. "You're making a big deal out of nothing. It's just a trip." "Just a trip?" I echoed, my voice rising. It was a gesture for my parents, Ethan, something special for them. And you and your mother just bulldozed over it. Ethan's patience snapped. Enough, Alara. You're acting like a child. You need to start thinking about what's best for this family. The word family echoed in my ears, twisted and corrupted by his and Vera's selfishness. And what about what's best for me? For my family? I countered. Ethan stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. You're my wife, Alara. Your place is here with me and my mother. If you can't accept that, maybe we shouldn't be married. His words hung in the air, a threat and a challenge all at once. For a moment I felt a pang of fear, of uncertainty, but then a wave of clarity washed over me. Maybe you're right, Ethan, I said quietly, my decision made. Maybe we shouldn't. His eyes widened, taken aback by my response. What are you saying? I met his gaze, my resolve steeling. I'm saying that this marriage, this life, it's not what I want, not with you and Vera controlling every aspect of it. Ethan's face contorted with anger. You'll regret this, Alara. You think you can just walk away? From me? From this family? I stood, facing him squarely. I'm not walking away, Ethan. I'm taking back my life. He snorted, dismissive. We'll see how long you last without us. I turned away, my mind racing with plans and possibilities. The stage was set, the players in place. It was time for my revenge to unfold. As I packed a small bag, my thoughts were clear and focused. Ethan and Vera had pushed me to the edge, and now they would see just how far I was willing to go. This was no longer just about a trip to Miami. This was about reclaiming my dignity, my independence, and showing them that I was not to be underestimated. I left the house without a backward glance, the door closing behind me with a finality that felt like freedom. I moved back to my parents' house, each step feeling like a weight lifting off my shoulders. My parents, though surprised, supported my decision. In the sanctuary of my old room, I plotted my next move. A few days later, Ethan called. Alara, where are you? We need to talk about the Miami trip. I'm at my parents', I replied, my voice steady. And there's nothing to talk about. You've made your decision. He was silent for a moment. You can't just run away from this. We're married. Not for much longer, I said quietly. I'm filing for divorce, Ethan. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. Divorce? You can't be serious. I've never been more serious, I affirmed. Our marriage is over, Ethan. He sputtered in disbelief. You'll regret this. You think you can just leave me and get away with it? I smiled, a sense of empowerment surging through me. I'm not getting away with anything. I'm taking back my life. Ethan's voice turned cold. We'll see about that. And the Miami trip? You're ruining everything. I chuckled softly. Oh, Ethan, you have no idea. Enjoy your trip. The line went dead, and I sat back, a plan forming in my mind. Ethan and Vera thought they had won, but the game had just begun. The next day, I called the airline. I need to make a change to the reservation for the Miami trip. The agent was accommodating. Of course, Miss Alara, what changes would you like to make? I won't be going, I said. The tickets are non-transferable, correct? That's right, the agent confirmed. Good, I said, a smile playing on my lips. Keep it that way. The day of their departure arrived, and I couldn't help but feel a twinge of anticipation. Ethan and Vera, unaware of the surprise awaiting them at the airport, were in for a rude awakening. I received a call from Ethan later that day, his voice frantic. Alara, what the hell did you do? They won't let us board. The tickets are void without you. I feigned innocence. Really? That's strange. I guess you should have read the fine print, Ethan. You did this on purpose, he accused. I shrugged, even though he couldn't see me. You took something that wasn't yours, Ethan. Actions have consequences. His voice was a mix of anger and desperation. This isn't over, Alara. You'll pay for this. I hung up, a sense of satisfaction washing over me. This was just the beginning of their downfall. Ethan and Vera had underestimated me, but they were about to learn just how costly that mistake was. As I sat back, a plan unfolding in my mind, I knew one thing for sure. Revenge was a dish best served cold, and I had just started cooking. After thwarting Ethan and Vera's Miami plans, I felt a sense of control returning to my life. But my thirst for justice was far from quenched. The real act of retribution was about to begin. A week passed, and I received a call from Ethan. His tone was a mix of anger and desperation. Alara, we need to talk. I'm coming over. I agreed, curiosity piqued. When he arrived, he was a shadow of his usual arrogant self. "Alara, I'm in trouble," he began, his eyes avoiding mine. I raised an eyebrow. "What kind of trouble?" He hesitated before confessing. "At work. They've started an investigation. They think I've been embezzling funds." I suppressed a smile. "Embezzling? That's serious, Ethan." He ran a hand through his hair, visibly stressed. "It's not just that. They're questioning my absences, my trips with Mom. They think it's all connected." I leaned back, the pieces falling into place. "Sounds like you've made quite a mess." He looked up, desperation in his eyes. "Alara, I need your help. You have to vouch for me. Tell them I was with you." I laughed, the sound bitter. "Why would I do that, Ethan, after everything?" He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "Please, Alara, I'm begging you. If I lose this job, I'm ruined." I stared at him, the man who had once been my world, now reduced to a groveling mess. "You should have thought about that before, Ethan. You made your bed. Now lie in it." As he left, his shoulders slumped. I knew the wheels of karma were turning. The following day, news of Ethan's dismissal and his embezzlement spread. Vera, once so proud and haughty, became the subject of whispers and judgmental glances in the neighborhood. Their fall from grace was swift and merciless. Ethan tried to reach out again, but I was done. My lawyer handled the divorce proceedings, ensuring I was well protected and compensated. As for Ethan, he was left to face the consequences of his actions alone. I visited my parents, sharing the news. "It's over," I told them. "The divorce is final." My mother hugged me, tears in her eyes. "You're strong, Alara. Stronger than you know." I nodded, a sense of peace settling over me. I had to be, Mom, for myself. In the end, Ethan and Vera reaped what they had sown. Their deceit and selfishness had been their undoing. As for me, I was free from their toxic grip, ready to start anew. The scars of the past would always be there, but they were a reminder of the battles I had faced and won. I was no longer the meek, compliant wife. I was Alara, a woman who had stood up for herself and emerged stronger. The day after my divorce was finalized marked the beginning of a new chapter in my life. The shackles of my oppressive marriage were finally broken, and I could breathe again. Sitting in my parents' garden, I reflected on the journey that had led me here. The pain, the betrayal, and ultimately, the triumph over those who sought to control me. My mother joined me with 2 cups of tea. "What will you do now, Alara?" she asked gently. I took a sip, feeling the warmth spread through me. "I'm going to live, Mom, for myself this time." She smiled, a look of pride in her eyes. "You've grown so much, darling." Our conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. My father answered it, his voice rising in surprise. "Ethan, what are you doing here?" I stood, my heart pounding. Ethan stood at the door, a shadow of his former self. "Alara, I need to talk to you." I walked over, my resolve firm. "There's nothing left to say, Ethan." He looked desperate, his eyes pleading. "Please, Alara, I've lost everything. My job, my reputation. Even Mom won't talk to me. I need your help." I shook my head, incredulous. "You expect me to help you? After everything you've done?" He reached out, but I stepped back. "I'm sorry, Alara, I was wrong. Please give me another chance." Then I looked at him, seeing the man I once loved now broken and humbled. "It's too late, Ethan. You made your choices, and now you have to live with them." He slumped, defeated. "I understand. I'm sorry, Alara. Truly." As he walked away, I felt a sense of closure. Ethan's downfall was his own doing. He had underestimated me and paid the price. Turning back to my parents, I smiled. "I think it's time for a new adventure." Weeks later, I found myself on a plane to Miami, the trip I had won all those months ago. This time it was on my terms. My parents sat beside me, their excitement contagious. As the plane soared above the clouds, I looked out the window, a sense of freedom washing over me. I had faced my battles and emerged victorious. Now it was time to enjoy the peace that came after the storm. Miami awaited, a symbol of my newfound independence and strength. I was ready to embrace whatever came next, to live a life filled with joy on my terms. Ethan and Vera were part of my past, a chapter closed and left behind. Ahead lay endless possibilities, a future where I was the author of my own story, and I was determined to make it a beautiful one. I stood there, drenched from head to toe, staring at the locked door of what used to be a symbol of our shared dreams. The storm outside mirrored the tempest in my heart, but it was nothing compared to the hurricane about to be unleashed. Gripping the doorknob, I inhaled deeply, bracing myself for the confrontation that had been brewing for far too long. "Ethan," my voice, sharper than I intended, cut through the pitter-patter of the rain as the door swung open, revealing my husband Ethan, looking as if he'd just seen a ghost. "We need to talk. Now." His gaze, once filled with warmth and love, now held a flicker of annoyance that quickly morphed into concern. "Kira, what's wrong? You're soaked." Ignoring the urge to break down, I steadied my voice, my eyes locked on his. "It's Lily," I said, the name of our daughter weighing heavily on my tongue. She's gone, Ethan." The color drained from his face, his body tensing as if preparing for a physical blow. "Gone? What do you mean? Gone? Kira, please." The pain in his eyes was real, but so was the anger and betrayal simmering inside me. "I mean, she's been in a terrible accident because you were too busy to care, because you've been too caught up in your own world to notice she needed you." Ethan staggered back as if I'd struck him, his hand reaching out for support against the doorframe. No, that can't be true. Kira, please, tell me this is a mistake." There was a part of me that wanted to take back the words, to soothe the agony etched across his face. But the larger part, the part fueled by months of frustration, anger, and heartache, needed him to feel the weight of his neglect. "You should have been there, Ethan. For all the times you promised and failed to show, this is on you." His voice broke as he spoke. "I need to see her. Please." The resolve in my heart wavered for a moment, seeing the man I once loved beyond measure crumble before me. But this was necessary, a shock to jolt him back to the reality from which he'd been absent far too long. "She's at the hospital. They're doing everything they can, but you should have been the one doing everything for her long before this." Ethan moved past me, grabbing his keys and wallet in a haste, his actions filled with a panic I hadn't seen in years. "I'll go now. I'll make it right, Kira. I swear." Watching him rush out into the storm, I felt a bitter mix of satisfaction and sorrow. This was the start of a long, arduous journey. A journey to make him understand the depth of his failures, not just as a husband, but as a father. The rain continued to pour, each drop a reminder of the tears shed in the silence of our crumbling home. As the sound of Ethan's car faded into the distance, I closed the door behind me, leaning against it for support. The house felt emptier than ever, a shell of the love and laughter it once held. But this was just the beginning of a reckoning for Ethan's negligence and the first step towards reclaiming the life that we, especially Lily, deserved. The deception about Lily's condition was a desperate, calculated move, a lie born out of the necessity to awaken Ethan from his complacency. The real battle, however, lay ahead. It was a fight for justice, for accountability, and above all, for the restoration of a broken family torn apart by indifference and presumed infidelity. Tonight the storm raged on, both outside and within the walls of the Wilsons' home, heralding the tumultuous journey that lay ahead. The hospital's fluorescent lights felt harsh against my eyes as I paced the sterile hallway, waiting for news on Lily. The lie I told Ethan gnawed at me, but desperation had driven me to extremes. The sound of approaching footsteps pulled me from my thoughts, and I turned to see Ethan, his face a mask of worry and fear. "How is she? Can I see her?" he asked, breathless, from what I assumed was a combination of his rush here and the anxiety consuming him. I hesitated, the moment of truth looming large. "She's stable. They're running some tests. Ethan, there's something I need to tell you." His relief at my first words was palpable, but confusion quickly took its place. "What is it? What's wrong?" Taking a deep breath, I faced him squarely. "Lily isn't gone, Ethan. I lied because I didn't know how else to get through to you. You've been so distant, so absent. She needed you, and you weren't there." The transformation in Ethan was immediate. Relief gave way to anger, his eyes narrowing. "You lied about our daughter's life?" "Yes, I lied. Because nothing else seems to matter to you lately. Not me, not Lily, not the life we built together." My voice rose, tinged with anger and pain. Ethan stepped back as if my words were physical blows. "I can't believe you'd do this. How could you play with our emotions like that? How could you not see what's happening right in front of you?" I shot back, my frustration boiling over. "You're never here, Ethan, and even when you are, you're not really present. We might as well be ghosts." Our heated exchange was cut short by the nurse's arrival, her expression one of professional concern. "Mr. and Mrs. Wilson, Lily is asking for you." We followed her in silence, the tension between us thick. Seeing Lily, so small and vulnerable in her hospital bed, brought home the reality of our fractured family. Ethan's face softened as he approached her, guilt written all over his features. "Lily, I'm so sorry, sweetie. I should have been there for you," he murmured, taking her hand gently. Lily's response was a weak smile, her voice barely a whisper. "It's okay, Daddy. I just want us to be a family again." That night, after Lily fell asleep, Ethan and I sat in a cold, uncomfortable silence in the hospital cafeteria. The distance between us felt insurmountable, a chasm widened by neglect and hurtful truths. "Ethan, we can't go on like this. Something has to change," I said, breaking the silence. He looked away, his jaw clenched. "I don't know if I can forgive you for lying about something so serious. And I don't know if I can keep living with a ghost of a husband. Ethan, you've been avoiding us, staying out late, missing family dinners, forgetting Lily's events. Is there someone else?" Ethan's silence was answer enough, his avoidance a deafening confirmation of my worst fears. "I see," I whispered, feeling a cold resolve settling in my heart. This was more than just neglect. It was betrayal. The ride home was silent, each lost in our own thoughts. As I lay in bed that night, the magnitude of Ethan's betrayal weighed heavily on me. The love that once bound us together had been eroded by lies and indifference. But as I listened to Ethan's shallow breathing, a plan began to form in my mind, a plan to expose the truth and seek justice for the pain he had caused. The road ahead was clear. Ethan's negligence and infidelity would not go unpunished. For Lily's sake, and for my own, I would fight to ensure that he faced the consequences of his actions. This was no longer just about saving our marriage. It was about reclaiming my life and protecting my daughter from further harm. The following weeks were a blur of hospital visits and silent dinners at home. Lily's recovery was the only silver lining in the thick cloud of tension that hung over our household. Ethan's attempts at conversation felt forced, and my responses were cold, our interactions nothing more than necessary exchanges for Lily's sake. One evening, as Ethan sat across from me at the dinner table, his phone buzzed incessantly, a symphony of pings and vibrations that he diligently ignored. Lily, now more perceptive than ever, picked up on the tension. "Daddy, aren't you going to answer that?" she asked, her fork paused midair. Ethan shot me a wary glance before replying, "It's nothing important, Lily, just work." But Lily's curiosity was piqued. "You work a lot, Daddy. You missed my school play and my soccer game last week." Ethan's face tightened, the lines of guilt etching deeper. "I know, sweetheart. I'm really sorry. I promise I'll make it up to you." But promises were cheap, especially those that had been broken too many times before. I watched them, my heart aching for Lily, who still held hope for her father's redemption. Later that night, as Ethan and I lay in bed, miles apart in the same room, I turned to face him. "Ethan, your phone was going off all through dinner. Is it really just work?" He sighed, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of his secrets. "Kira, I'm trying to fix things. Can't we just leave it at that?" "No, we can't. Not when fixing things means neglecting your family. Who were you texting, Ethan?" His silence was a chasm, deep and wide, filled with unspoken truths. The next morning, I decided it was time to seek those truths myself. While Ethan was in the shower, his phone lay unattended on the kitchen counter. A quick glance confirmed my suspicions. Messages from a contact saved only as E filled the screen, their tone intimate and their content damning. Armed with this knowledge, I confronted Ethan. "Who is E?" I asked, holding his phone up as he walked into the kitchen. Ethan froze, the color draining from his face. "Kira, it's not what you think." "Isn't it? Can't wait to see you again. Last night was amazing." "How should I think about that, Ethan?" My voice was steady, but inside, I was crumbling. He reached for the phone, but I pulled it back. "Ethan, you've been lying to me, to us. How long has this been going on?" The confession, when it came, was a mere whisper. "A few months. I'm sorry, Kira, I never wanted to hurt you." "Hurt me?" The realization that Ethan's betrayal wasn't just emotional but physical felt like a physical blow. The foundation of our marriage, our family, had been shattered by his actions. "I want you to leave," I said, the words cold and final. Ethan's protest was weak. "Kira, please, I can explain." "There's nothing to explain. You've made your choice. Now it's time you live with it, away from Lily and me." The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Ethan moved out, and I focused on Lily, who was confused and hurt by the sudden change. But amidst the turmoil, a fierce determination grew within me. Ethan's negligence and betrayal had not only damaged our family, but had also ignited a resolve within me to protect Lily and ensure that Ethan faced the consequences of his actions. As I lay in bed each night, the silence of the house, a stark reminder of the gaping hole Ethan's departure had left, my thoughts turned to revenge. Not petty acts of spite, but a calculated plan to expose his deceit and ensure he could no longer harm us. For Lily's sake, and for my own, I was ready to fight. This was more than just a broken marriage. It was a battle for justice and a stand against betrayal. In the weeks that followed Ethan's departure, the void he left behind became a space for Lily and me to heal and bond over our shared pain. Yet, beneath the surface of our newfound routine, a storm was brewing, a storm of my own making, aimed squarely at Ethan. One afternoon, as Lily and I sat at the kitchen table working on her school project, the phone rang. The caller ID flashed Ethan's number, a sight that still made my heart skip, not out of love, but a cocktail of anger and anticipation. "Mom, it's Dad," Lily said, her voice a mix of hope and hesitation. I nodded, gesturing for her to answer. "Go ahead, sweetie. I'll be right here." Lily picked up the phone, her voice brightening as she spoke to Ethan. "Hi, Dad. Yeah, we're working on a project about the solar system. Mom's helping me." I listened, my emotions a whirlwind as Lily chatted animatedly, sharing details of her life from which Ethan had chosen to absent himself. After a few minutes, she handed me the phone, her eyes searching mine for any sign of what to expect. Taking a deep breath, I steeled myself. "Ethan? Kira, how are you both doing?" His voice was tentative, laced with a guilt that did little to soothe the raw edges of my heart. "We're managing. What do you want, Ethan?" There was a pause, and then, "I want to see Lily. I miss her, Kira. I miss you both." The words, meant to tug at my heartstrings, only fueled my resolve. "Lily is doing fine. As for seeing her, you know the conditions. Your actions have consequences, Ethan." Ethan's frustration was palpable, even through the phone. "I'm her father, Kira. You can't just cut me out of her life because of a mistake." "A mistake?" The word tasted bitter in my mouth. "No, Ethan. What you did was not a mistake. It was a series of choices that you consciously made, choices that hurt your family. You need to understand the gravity of that." The conversation ended shortly after, with promises from Ethan to do better and pleas for a chance to prove himself. But words were cheap, and his track record spoke volumes. That evening, as I tucked Lily into bed, her question caught me off guard. "Mom, is Dad a bad person?" I paused, choosing my words carefully. "No, sweetie. Your dad made some bad choices, but that doesn't necessarily make him a bad person. It's complicated." Lily nodded, her understanding limited by her tender age. "I miss him," she admitted, her voice small. "I know, baby, I know." I kissed her forehead, my heart heavy with the burden of our situation. The days turned into weeks, and as the storm outside mirrored the turmoil in our lives, I began to lay the groundwork for my plan. Ethan's negligence and betrayal would not go unchecked. I started documenting everything. His missed visits, the late-night calls, the text messages from E. Everything would serve as ammunition for the battle ahead. One particularly stormy night, as lightning illuminated the sky and thunder shook the windows, I sat at the kitchen table, poring over the evidence I had gathered. The weather outside seemed to echo the chaos Ethan had brought into our lives, a fitting backdrop for my preparations. The sound of the doorbell shattered the silence, pulling me from my thoughts. I checked the clock. Almost midnight. Who could it be at this hour? I approached the door cautiously, peering through the peephole before opening it to find Ethan on the other side, soaked from the rain, his eyes desperate. "Kira, we need to talk. I can't live like this," he pleaded, his voice breaking. The sight of him, so vulnerable, might have once stirred sympathy in my heart, but those days were long gone. "You should have thought about that before, Ethan. You made your choice." Closing the door on his pleading figure, I turned back to the evidence spread out for me. Ethan's time of reckoning was approaching, and I would be the storm that swept him away. The morning after Ethan's late visit, I woke with a resolve stronger than ever. The sight of him, drenched and desperate, had not softened my heart, but had instead solidified my determination to see through the plan I had been meticulously crafting. Ethan needed to face the full consequences of his actions, not just for me, but for Lily, whose innocent questions about her father's love and absence haunted me. I sat Lily down after breakfast, a serious conversation brewing over the remains of our meal. Lily, your dad and I are going through a difficult time, as you know. It's important that you understand, no matter what happens, we both love you very much. Lily nodded, her eyes wide and trusting. I know, Mom, but why doesn't Dad come to see us anymore? The simplicity of her question stung, a reminder of the complexity of adult failures to a child's heart. Daddy made some mistakes, sweetheart. Right now, it's important for us to focus on being strong and happy together. As the day progressed, I took steps to initiate the next phase of my plan. I contacted a lawyer, detailing Ethan's neglect, his affair, and the impact of his actions on Lily and me. The lawyer listened, his voice calm and reassuring, promising to guide me through the process of holding Ethan accountable. That evening, Ethan called again, his voice a mixture of desperation and anger. Kira, you're turning Lily against me. I have rights. The only person turning Lily against you is you, Ethan. Your actions speak louder than any words could, I replied, my voice steady. I want to see my daughter. I'll take this to court if I have to, he threatened, his voice gaining an edge. If that's the route you choose, be prepared to face the consequences. I have documented everything, Ethan. Your neglect, your affair, everything. You think a court will look kindly on that? There was silence on the other end, the weight of reality settling in. Kira, please. There has to be another way. The time for another way has long passed, Ethan. You made your choices. Now you live with them. After hanging up, I felt a surge of empowerment mixed with sorrow. This wasn't the life I had envisioned for us, but I was determined to emerge from this storm stronger, for Lily's sake. The next few days were a whirlwind of legal consultations and preparations. Ethan's sporadic attempts to contact us became more desperate, but I remained firm, bolstered by the support of my lawyer and the unwavering goal of securing a better future for Lily and me. One afternoon, as I collected mail from the mailbox, an envelope caught my eye. It was from Ethan. Hesitating for a moment, I opened it to find a letter and several photographs. Photos of us, happier times that now seemed like a distant memory. His letter spoke of regret, of a desire to turn back time and make different choices. But as I read his words, I couldn't help but feel it was too little, too late. That evening, as Lily and I sat on the couch, her head resting in my lap as we watched her favorite show, I realized the full extent of what I was fighting for. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice. Justice for the pain Ethan had caused, for the neglect Lily had suffered, and for the betrayal that had shattered our family. As the days turned into weeks and the legal proceedings began to take shape, my resolve never wavered. Ethan had awakened a strength in me I never knew I had, a strength fueled by love for my daughter and a desire for justice. The storm that had once threatened to break me had instead forged a new path, one where I stood firm against the winds of betrayal and neglect, ready to fight for the future Lily and I deserved. The legal proceedings against Ethan unfolded with a cold, methodical precision that mirrored the detachment I had come to associate with our crumbling marriage. Each document, each piece of evidence, was a brick in the fortress I was building around Lily and me, a defense against the chaos Ethan had brought into our lives. One morning, as I prepared for another meeting with my lawyer, Lily approached me, her expression serious beyond her years. Mom, will I have to choose between you and Dad? Her question stopped me in my tracks. Kneeling down, I took her hands in mine. No, sweetheart. This isn't about choosing sides. It's about making sure we're safe and happy. I'll do everything in my power to make sure you feel loved and protected, no matter what. Lily nodded, a semblance of relief washing over her face. Okay, Mom, I trust you. The meeting with my lawyer that day was a turning point. Armed with the evidence of Ethan's neglect and infidelity, we outlined our strategy. But it was the private investigator's report that truly shifted the balance in our favor. Photos and detailed accounts of Ethan's affair, his frequent absences, and neglect of Lily painted a damning picture that no courtroom could ignore. Ethan will have a hard time disputing these, my lawyer remarked, flipping through the report. This strengthens your case significantly. As the court date approached, Ethan's attempts to reach out became more frantic. Voicemails and letters piled up, each one a desperate plea for reconciliation, for a second chance I knew we couldn't afford to give him. The day of the hearing was a maelstrom of emotions. Standing before the judge, I recounted the events that had led us here, each word a testament to the battle we'd been fighting in silence. Ethan, on the other hand, seemed diminished, his usual confidence replaced by a palpable sense of defeat. "Mrs. Wilson, your testimony and the evidence presented make a compelling case," the judge said, his voice grave. "Mr. Wilson, do you have anything to say in your defense?" Ethan's reply was a mix of apologies and excuses, a last-ditch effort to sway the judge's opinion. But the evidence was irrefutable, the impact of his actions on Lily and me undeniable. In the end, the judge's ruling was a vindication of everything we had endured. Full custody was granted to me, along with a stipulation for supervised visits for Ethan, should he seek them. The court also ordered Ethan to undergo counseling, recognizing the need for him to address the issues that had led to his neglectful behavior. As we left the courtroom, I felt Lily's hand slip into mine, her grip tight. "Is it over, Mom?" she asked, her voice hopeful yet tinged with uncertainty. I squeezed her hand, a promise in my grasp. "It's a new beginning, sweetie. We can start healing now." The victory in court was bittersweet. While it offered a legal resolution to our struggles, the emotional scars remained, a reminder of the cost of Ethan's betrayal. Yet as Lily and I walked out into the sunlight, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. The battle was over, but our journey of healing was just beginning. In the weeks that followed, Lily and I focused on rebuilding our lives. Therapy sessions, weekend outings, and quiet evenings at home became our new normal. Slowly, the laughter returned to our house, filling the spaces that grief and betrayal had once occupied. Ethan's attempts to reconnect became less frequent as he started his court-ordered counseling. I hoped, for Lily's sake, that he would find the help he needed to be a better father, even if from a distance. As for me, the fight had revealed a strength I never knew I possessed, a resilience forged in the fires of adversity. For Lily, for myself, I had stood up against the storm and emerged stronger. Our future was uncertain, but we faced it together, united by love and a bond that no betrayal could sever. The newfound peace in our home was palpable, a serene contrast to the storm that had raged before. Lily's laughter became the soundtrack of our lives, each day a step further away from the darkness that had once threatened to engulf us. But the final act of this drama was yet to unfold, a confrontation that would close the chapter on Ethan's betrayal once and for all. It was a crisp autumn morning when the call came. A number I didn't recognize flashed on my phone, but intuition urged me to answer. "Hello? Is this Kira Wilson?" The voice was unfamiliar, hesitant. "Yes, speaking. I think you need to know something about your husband, Ethan." The caller paused, as if weighing the impact of her next words. I was involved with him, but there's more you should know." The revelation wasn't a shock, but the call was a catalyst, setting in motion the final confrontation I had both dreaded and anticipated. We agreed to meet, and as I sat across from Ethan's mistress in a quiet corner of a local cafe, her story unfolded, a tale of lies and promises, similar to the one Ethan had woven around us. Armed with this new information, and with evidence that underscored Ethan's inability to change, I knew what had to be done. It wasn't just for me anymore, but for Lily, and for every promise Ethan had broken. Confronting Ethan wasn't a decision I made lightly. As I stood at his doorstep, Lily by my side, a mix of resolve and apprehension coursed through me. When he opened the door, his surprise at seeing us was evident, quickly replaced by a cautious wariness. "Kira, Lily, what are you doing here?" Ethan's voice betrayed a hint of fear, a recognition of the reckoning that stood before him. "We know, Ethan. We know everything." My voice was steady, belying the turmoil inside. "Know what?" "Kira, I can explain." Ethan's attempt at deflection was cut short by the evidence I presented, the final nails in the coffin of his deceit. The confrontation was intense, a cathartic release of months of pain and betrayal. Ethan's attempts to justify his actions fell on deaf ears, his words empty and devoid of the remorse we needed to hear. "You chose this path, Ethan. You chose to step outside our marriage, to break the trust that held our family together, I said, each word underscored by a conviction forged in the fires of betrayal. Lily's presence was a silent testament to the stakes of this confrontation. Her eyes, wide and watchful, bore witness to the crumbling facade of the father she had idolized. The realization of his loss seemed to finally dawn on Ethan, the understanding that there was no going back from the damage he had caused. "I'm sorry," he whispered, a plea for forgiveness that came too late. "Sorry doesn't undo the hurt, Ethan. It doesn't bring back the time you missed with Lily, the moments you chose to spend elsewhere." My voice broke, the weight of our collective pain bearing down on me. As we turned to leave, Ethan's voice, now laced with desperation, called out, "Kira, please, don't do this. We can still fix this." But it was over. The finality of our departure marked the end of our shared journey, a chapter closed on a marriage undermined by betrayal. In the days that followed, Lily and I leaned on each other, finding strength in our bond. The confrontation with Ethan had been a necessary closure, a way to reclaim our dignity and move forward, unburdened by the shadow of his actions. Our lives, though forever altered, began to find a new rhythm, a new normal. The pain of the past remained, a scar on our hearts, but it no longer defined us. We had faced the storm together, and in its aftermath, we found a resilience and a hope for the future that no betrayal could diminish. The aftermath of our confrontation with Ethan marked the beginning of a new chapter for Lily and me, one filled with hope, but shadowed by the remnants of past betrayals. We found solace in the embrace of my parents, who welcomed us into their home with open arms, their support a beacon of light in the lingering darkness. As we settled into our new life, the reality of our situation began to crystallize. Ethan, faced with the consequences of his actions, spiraled into a solitude of his own making. His career suffered, friendships waned, and his financial stability crumbled under the weight of alimony and child support payments mandated by the court. The social ostracism he experienced served as a stark reminder of the price of betrayal. One day, as Lily and I sat in the garden, basking in the tranquility of a life slowly piecing itself back together, she looked up at me with a question that had been lingering in her eyes for weeks. "Mom, do you think Dad will ever be part of our lives again?" I paused, considering the weight of her question. "Lily, your dad made some very big mistakes. It's up to him to make amends, to show that he's changed. But it's also okay for us to move forward, to find happiness without waiting for that to happen." Lily nodded, a maturity beyond her years settling over her features. "I just wish things could have been different," she whispered. "So do I, sweetheart, so do I," I replied, pulling her into a hug. The simplicity of the moment underscored the complexity of our journey, a journey of healing and rediscovery. The weeks turned into months, and as the seasons changed, so too did the narrative of our lives. I returned to work, embracing the challenges and satisfaction that came with my career. Lily thrived in school, her resilience a testament to her strength. Together, we navigated the waters of our new reality, finding joy in the simplicity of our daily routines. It was during this time of quiet reconstruction that I began to reflect on the journey we had undertaken. The pain, the betrayal, the fight for justice had all led us to this moment, a moment of tentative peace and cautious optimism. The struggle had not only been about revenge or holding Ethan accountable. It had been about reclaiming our lives, about ensuring that Lily grew up in a world where she felt loved, valued, and protected. One evening as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, the beauty of the moment felt like a balm to the scars we bore. "Mom, do you think we'll ever be able to forgive Dad?" Lily's question broke the silence, her voice tinged with curiosity and hope. I took a deep breath, considering her words. "Forgiveness isn't about forgetting, Lily. It's about letting go of the anger and hurt so it doesn't hold us back. Your dad has a lot of work to do, but maybe one day we'll be able to forgive him. For now, let's focus on us, on building the happiest life we can." Lily smiled, a reflection of the peace we had fought so hard to achieve. "I love you, Mom. I love you too, Lily. More than anything." As the sky turned from pink to deep blue, the stars beginning to twinkle in the twilight, I realized that our story was one of resilience, of the unbreakable bond between a mother and her daughter. Despite the turmoil, the heartache, and the battles we had faced, we emerged stronger, united by our journey from despair to empowerment. Our future was uncertain, filled with challenges and opportunities in equal measure. But one thing was clear. Whatever lay ahead, Lily and I would face it together, our love and strength a testament to the power of starting anew.